Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, 2025, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week, we take the questions that we ask here on Wednesday afternoon from our newsletter that comes out on Monday morning. And that newsletter is available, a complete archive of the 7 years plus of those editions are available at our website, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. And on that site, you'll also be able to subscribe to the newsletter if you choose. There are 2 ways to do that, either through the link on that page. That'll take you to a quick subscribe form that will allow you to enter your name and institution and your email, and we'll get that out to you with it, and you'll be added to the list so that you get it in your email inbox every Monday morning at about 9 a.m. Eastern. Also on that same page at smieconsulting.org/subscribe page, you can subscribe to the LinkedIn version of the same content that comes out a half hour earlier at 8:30 a.m. and that can be easily added as well, depending on which way you prefer to get your international edification each week, whether through emails, various emails you get, or through LinkedIn. You'll get a notification bell every week when that comes out in your notifications, and then you can check out the newsletter version. It's about a 5 to 10 minute read max each week, and then each news story, which includes social media, webinars, AI stories, anything tech related or blog related, we'll post into that section. We have a roundup of a U.S. news, whether that affects international education. Could be anything from a new executive order, a new proposed rule that DHS puts out, anything the State Department does, pieces of legislation, any trend reports that we see coming out. We'll list those in the kind of the big picture news. We then have a Solutions Central section that talks to some of the ways that institutions might be, or states, or companies, or organizations might be doing things differently that might give us some different way of looking at things in a more positive direction. And then finally a global roundup, which covers how international ed stories and policies and government changes are impacting how other countries that are trying to become destinations for international students, how they're doing what they're doing policy-wise, government-wise, institutionally, to try and bring more students to their shores. So that's the newsletter that comes out on Monday, called All the SMIE News Fit to Share. In case you're wondering, SMIE is the consulting business I started back in 2014 when I left Education USA. Stands for Social Media and International Education Consulting. So those are the topics we cover every week in the newsletter, as well as here in the roundup. So please do subscribe to the newsletter if you haven't already. One of 2 options there. You'll always, if you're following me on LinkedIn, you'll certainly see all the stories that are in the newsletter throughout the course of a week, but you'll get them in one dose in an easily digestible newsletter format, allow you to get our hot takes on those news stories, get the link with the full story, and then we'll discuss here on Wednesdays 3 themes that we see developing in the news stories of the week. And that's what we cover in depth, kind of going next level beyond our hot takes. On Monday, you'll get the thoughts on how we can be responding to these questions on our campuses, what that means for policy in our country, what we might be able to do differently on campus. All of that we'll talk about. Some of those that we'll get into here in the next few minutes. So let's get right into it. And I should say that for our 2 newsletter versions, we've crossed a very important threshold. We're now over 2,700 subscribers to the newsletter content, that 2,700 international educators that are getting this news in their inboxes or in their notifications every week. So thank you for making SMIE Consulting a part of your weekly international edification. So let's get to the top story or the top question of the week, and that is, what are the hidden problems with the DS end? Now, those of us who've worked on the international student services side, have been international student advisors, have had opportunities to work with international students over the years. Anyone who's been in the profession as long as I have, which is since 1993, has only ever lived in a world where international students have had the ability to be in the country as long as they are successfully maintaining their status. That is, they are admitted F1 or J1 DS. And that DS is the kind of the golden ticket, really, that international students have had, that has allowed them to stay in the United States for multiple levels, multiple programs, multiple periods of OPT, depending on the degree levels that they've done. Really is kind of what all international students long for, because it is something that gives them a sense of security, gives them a sense of, well, okay, there's no real time clock that they're on other than for their individual institutions and the programs that they're enrolled in, departments, requirements, all of that. The government has never said to them that you have to leave after a certain date and time. What that has meant is for international students, every person who enters the United States who's not a permanent resident or citizen of the country has, with the exception of students, any non-immigrant who has come into the country has in their passports a stamp that in their visa that says how long they are admitted to. When students get visas from their in their home countries to come to the United States, the length of the visa, the stamp that's in their passport, will have an end date. There is not a visa that is issued that is not one that doesn't have an end date, and that is something that is important for students, because that visa for an international student is the key that lets them in to the United States. The visa stamp in their passport until this, and up until this DS rule goes into place, is only an important thing when a student is trying to enter the country. So if a student who comes in and, say, started with us in the fall, has a visa that is good for a year, if they go home and over the Christmas holiday break in December, between semesters or quarters at your institution, they don't have to go get a new visa to come back in January, if their visa is still valid until August or whenever it is that that year of their initial period might have ended. The only reason they would have to, if they have a year-long visa, is if it's a single entry visa. Most visas, if they're issued for that long of a period, are typically multiple entry. So the visa is only important for international students, and again, until and unless this DS rule changes. It's only ever important when they first come into the United States. And then anytime after when they leave and want to come back. But what will happen now, the new DS rule that was announced last Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday evening, was that the maximum duration for any student's documents, and this is typically will be their I-20s, their DS 2019s, that dictate when their program end date is, the maximum duration will be 4 years. And that 4-year time period is shorter than the length of time that a student who's doing a doctoral program might need if they're coming in fresh from a bachelor's to start a doctoral program. It is shorter than the average amount of time that international students who come to start a bachelor's degree might need. Typically 4.5 years is what they are requiring. So what it will do is students who get to the point where they have are coming to the end of their allowed stay, that the government and when they come into the country, their passport, it will be stamped. In the past, it's stamped with F1DS. It will now have an end date no longer than 4 years into the future from the date that they enter to start the program. So that will mean if they're not going to finish before that 4 years is up, or whatever the length of their program is, that means that they will then have to apply to Department of Homeland Security for an extension of their legal ability to stay. In the past, under the DS rule, if their program end date, which is really what guides a current student's ability to stay in the country, is as long as they're making satisfactory progress towards towards completion of their program. The general rule is the individual institution that issued that I-20, if the individual institutions will have their own internal processes on how students can extend their stay or extend their program, usually having to get some kind of verification from their academic advisor, from their department, if they're a graduate student, that they need more time. And however long that time is, and they can document their funding, that they have that funding for that extra period, then the new I-20 is issued with a new program end date to allow time for them to cover finish their academic program. Now, you may ask, well, what about a student who wants to do OPT, who's finishing their undergraduate program? If they have to apply for OPT, will they only get an extension if they've already been approved for OPT? So this is something that we still don't know all the final rules on, but the likelihood is that no extensions would be granted. Say if you graduate and were lucky enough to finish your degree in 4 years, you would potentially you finish your degree in 4 years. Then normally you have a 60-degree day grace period after your program end date, the date on your I-20, to be approved for either a change of status to a different degree program, different level of study, or change their visa to a different category altogether. Or if they're looking to do OPT, apply and have been approved for OPT. It's usually a 60-day window. That grace period is being reduced from 60 days to 30 days. So if this DS rule elimination does go forward. So that's one of the major hidden problems, is the grace period is reduced. We're compressing the timelines that students have to get decisions made on either extending their stay or going for OPT, whatever the case may be. So starting a new program, all of these things, that is a real challenge. So what happens when a student is maybe they're finishing their degree in the spring term, they want to apply for OPT, but their 4 years will be up before their OPT starts. Do they have to apply for that? A lot of unanswered questions. When do they have to apply for the extension? Is it when they finish their degree, so that their extended period can cover their OPT time, which can be from 1 to 3 years? And what happens if they only do it 1 year at a time? Does that mean every year the student's going to have to apply for an extension? It's creating an administrative nightmare, not just for the students that will now have all this extra layers of paperwork that they need to complete, but also costs. None of these processes will be free. They are now, with the exception of OPT or reinstatement. There aren't really costs that a student is paying if they're changing program, changing level, as long as they're maintaining their status and continuing on. Part of the rationale for this policy is to have defined ends on anyone who comes into the United States. And international students, since 1991, well over 30 years, have had the ability to be in the country for the duration of status, as long as they're maintaining successfully their student status. That could be a student that comes in as a high school student at age 14, till the time that they finish a doctoral program and then work on an OPT program. If they're in STEM, they do 4 years of high school, go to a 4-year university, do 3 years of OPT. Then that will be 11 years just finishing a bachelor's degree and 3 years of STEM OPT. They could come back and do a master's degree, 2 more years for that, and then 3 more years for OPT on top of that if it's STEM. And then same thing for a PhD, 3 to 5 years for the program, and then 3 more years of STEM OPT. So you could conceivably, if you came in high school till the time you finish a doctoral program, you could be in the United States legally in student status for probably 20 plus years. with work and schooling all the way through from high school on up to doctoral programs. So that is seen as inappropriate and should be not be possible in some anti-immigrant people's minds, and certainly in Stephen Miller's minds. You would think that that would be something he would think would be just abhorrent, that somebody could want to do that. And why would that be abhorrent? That's just remarkable that people would actually think that that's a bad thing, that someone wants to stay in this country, get another degree, get work experience, and maybe potentially they can stay and they want to stay. And they're obviously doing everything they can to stay, to do more, spend more money, to finish degrees, to stay in this country, to be able to work, to improve their conditions for themselves and their families, and become some of the most productive members of our society. Why would you not want that? And the government is finding a way to try and do away with that right now, and by ending DS and making it virtually impossible for a student without paying through the nose to go through the ringer every year after their initial 4 years is ended. Who knows what those extensions maximums will be? Is it only for another 4 years? Is it only for whatever period of their program? And then what happens if they have a change? Well, that's another thing that this DS ending, one of the hidden problems that we're seeing is that it would eliminate the ability for graduate applicants, once they're in their program in the United States, from changing their academic program. Anyone think that's going to be a little bit problematic? That a student who comes in, thank goodness they're not doing that for undergraduates, because to say that an undergraduate couldn't change their mind and be legally able to change their mind in terms of what their program would be, it would be just beggars belief. But to say that for a graduate student, how many of you DSOs can count on one hand students who have never changed their major throughout their graduate program or added a second program? That all of that would be prohibited if this DS end goes ahead. So there's some hidden challenges in there. The shortening of the grace period, the prohibition on graduate students changing their academic program. Who knows, and changing level as well, would be something that would have to be restricted. If they potentially would be going down a level, that would be definitely frowned upon by DHS in this current administration. So lots of problems with this, administratively, costs, how it's being portrayed in the media, like everything else this administration has done. The reaction is obviously negative in the world press. It's been largely negative that the U.S. is basically making it increasingly difficult for students to stay beyond 4 years maximum. So a student that's coming only for a 2-year master's degree and only has 1 year of OPT, if they're granted 4 years initially, and who knows whether they're actually going to be doing that. Probably what will happen is if the program is a 4-year program on their I-20, then they'll probably correspond the 4 year, the maximum of 4 years to that. If it's a doctoral program that might be 5 years, you're still only going to be able to get maximum 4 years, and then have to apply for an extension to allow you to finish, then another extension to allow you to do OPT, and if you change levels and do another program, then there's all more paperwork that they will have to complete and fees that they will have to pay. Now, USCIS, which would be handling these applications most likely, they're the ones that handle reinstatements. They're the ones that handle change of that handle OPT requests and other benefits, immigration benefits that require DHS approval. So no, this doesn't count like CPT and extensions that are currently, but there will be extensions, different kind of an extension that they will be handling with this new process. So they are supposed to be funded on a cost recovery basis. We know that State Department folks are with their staffing abroad at consulates and embassies. They're supposed to be cost recovery basis. That's supposed to be the same for DHS, that they are funded through the fees that they bring in. So their current staffing levels. You couldn't just impose this right away and expect them to be able to handle all the extra work. We know that DHS, their budget has gone through the roof, and that's mostly gone to ICE and CBP, but CIS would have to get a substantial increase in budget and staffing to be able to handle all the processing of these extra applications. That would be literally hundreds of thousands of applications every year that USCIS would have to process, have the staff and bandwidth and frankly the ability to do that in a timely manner before students time out and have to leave. Well, there'll be a grace period that once it's filed, then the expectation would be that they'll be able to continue. So there's a lot of unanswered questions so far. There is a public comment period that goes till September 29th. And the two stories that I've mentioned, put into the chat, one from Inside Higher Ed, and then also from the Economic Times in India. Also good to have that, how that is being received in the largest sending market to the U.S. We know that NAFSA is compiling resources that they're going to roll out to members in the next few days, I would assume, to allow us to conduct public comment periods. They're going through all the list of things that really are going to be huge administrative challenges to USCIS, to campuses, to students, to enact this change to the DS rule. So once we have those, I know we've already started the ball rolling on our campus at the University of Akron to figure out what those, how we want to phrase all of our objections to the ending of DS and the administrative burden it would place on us, the staffing requirements it would have, not only on our campuses, on the impact on students and ability to cover these costs, to navigate changing landscape of requirements and the extra assistance that they'll require, and frankly, just the costs alone are probably going to be exorbitant given this administration's reaction to cost recovery and charges for these and staffing that's going to be needed. All of that is our major issues. So we have basically 26 days to get our public comments in, and if you're an international educator in the United States, you have no excuse. And everybody who's listening to this who works on a campus, who is involved in international education, is a friend of international education, we have an obligation to fight for our students and to defend their ability to continue their programs with as little interruption as possible and reducing the hurdles that they have to overcome that are legitimate hurdles that are needed for monitoring. We already know that they're the most monitored group within of non-immigrants in the United States. No other class of visas has as strict a monitoring and tracking through SEVIS of their time, of their status, of their enrollment on campus, their paying their bills on time, their enrollment full-time in classes, all of the things they have to do with students. We have to track and report that in SEVIS. They're already the most monitored group in the United States, and probably the least troublesome group in the United States when you consider there are over 1.2 million of them on our campuses now in the United States. We are doing everything we can with this DS rule to reduce those numbers. And I don't think really if the administration in its heart of hearts, and some of my colleagues question whether they even have a heart, but in their heart of hearts really think that this is a good idea. When you have the president saying on one hand before he was elected that he would give green cards to every international student who graduates from a U.S. college or university. That obviously died, and when his MAGA base heard that, they just said, oh, no, that's not happening. That's just an idea he was throwing around, kicking it around. But one thing is contradictory to not saying that this president doesn't do things on the spur of the moment and changes his mind as often as we know he has on the Chinese issue. We know that China and the U.S. are locked in this tariff negotiation deal right now. The president has said, as the Secretary of State has said, that Chinese students who are members of the Communist Party will be denied visas. They're going to be aggressively revoked. The President said last week that he wants 600,000 Chinese students studying in the United States, which is more than double the current number in the U.S. now. He's doing that as a part of the negotiations, as a way to show some good faith to President Xi of China, to say, hey, we still want your students here. And he hasn't backed down from that. His base has said, no, we can't do that. We can't let that many more Chinese students come to the United States. We'll lose all our intellectual property, and technology will be lost, and all of the advances we make in research, we'll lose it. But he hasn't backed off that. So maybe until a trade deal is official, we won't know if it's for real or not. But that flies in the face of 600,000 Chinese students coming to the United States over the next few years. If they have this DS problem to deal with, that goes away. Maybe they won't want to come. So there's a lot that needs to happen here. If we want to defend the cause here and have a legitimate say in how our government makes decisions and fight the good fight, which we have to do, because our industry, our students, and their continued desire to come here depends on how well we respond to this public comment period in the next 26 days. So get on it. So let's move on to the second question. We did 25 minutes on that. That's a lot. I'm sorry, but it's one that I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we're all fighting and our ships are sailing in the right direction on this one for fighting the fight against eliminating DS, because it is one of those things that will have devastating impact on our ability to do our jobs in the United States in terms of working with international students, losing the ability to keep enrolling these students and having them want to come to our campuses. This is something that is worth fighting for. If this doesn't move you, check your pulse, because you're missing the point of who we are and what we do in international education. So let's move on to the next question of the day, and that is AI to blame for our issues in U.S. international education? Broad question here about AI and how it's been used, particularly in the last few months, and will continue to be used on an ongoing basis. Generative AI has been used, we know this for a fact, to scour social media, for people who were expressing, particularly on campuses, anti-Israel, pro-Hamas views, and people were put in detention centers for this as a result of this. The social media agent or the AI agents, and if you've worked with generative AI, you know you can create an agent to do pretty much anything to produce certain results or assess certain issues and gather data and scour various databases and do all of these things. That we know that AI has been used to find people who've said these things about that were anti-Israel, pro-Hamas, from campus protests, from newsletter or newspaper op-eds to what they've said in class as a faculty member. There are people who have been affected. What the actual number who've been impacted directly is, maybe, who knows? But there aren't, that we see publicly, we've seen maybe a dozen cases of this where it's specifically for pro-Hamas type rhetoric. We know that an AI agent was created by DHS back in March when we all dealt with a lovely SEVIS termination wave of 4,000 to 5,000 students that were wrapped up in this. For basically, an AI agent was created that cross-checked every name on SEVIS. Every student in SEVIS database was checked against all law enforcement databases in the United States for any interactions with U.S. law enforcement. That was basically the nature of that AI agent that was created. It led to 5,000 students who have, out of 1.2, 1.3 million students that are in SEVIS, 4,000 to 5,000, which is less than 0.3%, 0.3 tenths of 1%, less than 0.3% of all international students in the U.S. were wrapped up in this. But that suddenly became all international students are affected by this and are basically labeled as lawbreakers. And for the interactions of those 4,000 to 5,000, parking tickets, speeding tickets, minor infractions, some of which were resolved in the favor of the student. Some things there might have been a little bit more, a few cases of DUIs and maybe assaults, and those are still pending in the courts. All of that, those were seen as reasons to terminate status. Before that time, in March of this year, the government did not go into SEVIS and terminate students. It just didn't happen. U.S. universities and colleges and in schools that enrolled international students had the responsibility to go in, and should a student not maintain their status in whatever way they determined that to be, they would go in and terminate a student's record. If they fell below full time, if they didn't maintain satisfactory progress toward their degree, if they were expelled from the school, that would be a reason to terminate status. That is how terminations happened in the past. Starting in March, all of a sudden, 5,000 students out of 1 million plus get terminated in SEVIS. And the only way people found out was they went into SEVIS and got a list of alerts of terminated students. Not most campuses didn't have huge numbers. We had 3 at University of Akron, but some campuses had larger volumes. Might have had 10, 20 students or more. What that led to is some very bad advice given by some institutions after checking with their general counsels that said to these students who were terminated, you need to self-deport. Go home. And that was the advice they were given. Those students, many of which couldn't get back in, couldn't get new visas because they were in this limbo. And if they had waited 2 or 3 weeks, they would have had their SEVIS status reinstated. And everything could have continued as normal. But the fear that put into those students' hearts and to those that might have been worried about their status were just elevated through the roof and had really damaging impacts on what of those students and their well-being. There were obviously, for the students that left the country, the costs involved of having to leave all of a sudden unplanned, the costs of having to go and try and apply for a new visa, all of that unexpected cost. Some people, we had one student who was on OPT, that didn't leave the country, thankfully, but he was told he needed to pause work because his status was up in the air. Though he was reinstated, he was able to keep his job. Some students who were on OPT were actually forced to quit their jobs because the companies that were employing them didn't want to take a chance that they could run afoul of the government and have the students status be revoked, and then that impact them badly. So that was a cluster F, as polite a way of I can say it, that really painted a very poor picture of how a government should use AI to track this information. We now have, with the implementation of the social media vetting that's happening, we don't know the exact mechanics of how this will work by posts, by consulates and embassies around the world where the visa interviews are done. We don't know fully, and even our visa folks that we work with, former consular officers that are doing training for our students prior to going for their visa appointments, we don't know whether the checks are being done before the student goes for their visa interview so that the consular officer can be prepared to ask them about some of their posts that might be on potential red flags, or if it's happening after the interview and then the students are notified after the fact. I think it might vary depending on where they are in the world, how that process is being done. Is it another AI agent that's scanning this information, popping up any red flags, generating that for the consular officer? That's something that we don't know how that process works, but I'm sure AI is involved in that as well. So there are a couple of stories I just posted the links to. One of those is about Amnesty International is accusing the U.S. of using AI technology to spy on foreign students. And the whole spying on foreign students and monitoring of visitors, non-citizens to the United States, are we really that surprised that AI is being used, that there are tools out there that the government is spying on the U.S. Does anyone remember 10 years ago or longer, probably 15 years ago now, about Edward Snowden? Name ring a bell? WikiLeaks? All that data on how the U.S. government was spying on its own citizens through the NSA and other government intelligence agencies. It's nothing new for a government to want to know what its citizens are doing. And in some countries, it's a lot more significant than even here in the United States. If you're in Russia, if you're in China, any authoritarian regime, you're certainly going to have a level of comfort that you get used to as a citizen of those countries. That the government's going to be in your business. You could just go a trip to London, it's the city in the world that has more CCTV cameras than anywhere else in the world. That you can't make a move without somebody being caught on camera. That's similar effects to what's happened in China. That you just there's a fear. I don't want to do anything wrong. That's why the crime rate's so low in China. You feel watched the entire time, and freedom of expression and all of these things that we defend highly in the United States. We already know that the government's been surveying us for decades. Are we surprised that we're now using tech tools to do that through generative AI? I'm not. So I don't think that is as it's more of a red herring, frankly. There's another article is from a young post club, and it's actually an interesting debate. Two international students at different schools talking about their views on whether students should have share social media posts or social media handles as part of the visa process. One student taking the view that it's a national security concern. It's another way to vet the applicants. Whereas the other student was saying, no, it's a waste of time, and don't these consular officers have anything better to do to focus on the real threats to security, and those aren't necessarily evidenced in the social media posts of a 17-year-old or a 20-year-old. Those are valid questions and certainly a good debate to have. So we'll see what comes out of that. But it certainly AI has caused probably more than its fair share of concern. It certainly got a lot of publicity, as it's only in the last couple of years it's even been a thing, generative AI at least, that we have to grapple with in the United States. But we'll see where that all goes. But AI is not going away anytime soon, and it's all about how we leverage it for good and use and teach our students how to use it as a research tool, as a way to not replace the work that they need to do, but it's a tool that they can use to enhance how they gather information and refine statements and produce content. So this is all an ongoing question that we're not going to get the answers to today. But one answer I think we can get to in the last seconds that we have is, has Canadian international education hit rock bottom? Our colleagues north of the border have been crushed the last couple of years with study permit cap that has reduced, with the intention in the first year, 2024, reducing new study permit caps to 35% reduction in caps. They ended up having over a 45% reduction, so it had a much larger impact than they had hoped to reduce the strain on housing, on health services, on transportation, all of that. The major issues that led to the caps in the first place. They introduced a smaller cap of 10% this year, but their numbers for fall are already well down on what they were hoping to have. We've seen numbers just for this fiscal year. Second quarter saw a rise in Canadian study permit approval ratings, though the overall impact is just in the first half of 2025, only 31,580 permits were approved. And that was, and the target for this year is 300,000, which means at the current pace, they're only going to reach 20% of their goal, that 300,000 goal in terms of new students starting this year. So we're looking at 2025 approvals for new study permits are tracking at 31% approval rating. So approvals rates of study permits. So not only are the numbers down, the percentage of approvals is down. It was 67% in 2023. It was 45% in 2024. It's 31% so far this year. So some really challenging issues coming up for my colleagues in Canadian higher ed. Particularly impacting the vocational colleges. The big schools, name schools at the university level certainly aren't going to be suffering as significantly as the vocational colleges will. But certainly a lot of challenges on the horizon for Canadian international ed, and this year will probably be rock bottom. So kudos, not kudos, but thoughts and prayers to my colleagues north of the border, because we know you are suffering now. Well, that's all I have for you this week on the Roundup. Thank you again for joining, and we look forward to chatting with you again next, probably in 2 weeks. Next week, I'll be taking some leave to be with family. But the following week, I will be on the road. I'll be in Nepal and probably doing a live from somewhere in Kathmandu. So looking forward to chatting with you then as travel season finally begins for me a little bit late this year. So until next time, have a great week. Cheers.